We are live. We're starting in, I think, just a few seconds. So anybody joins us, that's good. We've got a 15-second delay. That's an important thing for everyone to remember, 15-second delay. But hopefully we're going to go to 3:30 in the UK, 10:30 in the morning for you, Scott.
That's correct.
So we're
It's 10:30 right
on the
now.
East Coast in Philly. We're 3:30 in the UK, 4:30 in Europe, 7:30 in the West Coast of America. But we're all coming along. So we'll give it a couple of minutes and then we will kick off into this. It's always good. It's a Friday afternoon. For some people, this is half term. We have it the school holiday. Some people had it last week. Some people have it this week. But we're getting close. Right. So we're going to start off now. Good afternoon. So, hello everyone. We're going to do a webinar today on designing a VOC program, a voice of customer program. That's our plan for today. And on the line along with me today, you can see we've got Scott Young. Scott Young will be taking us through the majority of this work. And I will be sat in the background, but I'm just doing the introduction. So let's start off with a little bit about who we are. So Scott and I, along with another person called Dan, we're the senior consultants in a company called Guido Scientific. We're a company of about 7 people, and we actually help companies, mainly in the scientific community, who are making products or instruments and so on. We help them launch, strengthen, or accelerate their business, depending on where they are. Maybe they're a startup, or maybe they're looking for a sale, or maybe they just need to do better. That strengthen element. So we've been doing this for about 2.5 years now. And part of what we do is do these webinars to explain a little bit about what we do and also to help people as they go through. And in this case, it's about voice of customer, which is something Scott does. Mainly, voice of customer is about helping product managers make better products and therefore, be more successful as people out there. And it's about talking to customers and understanding it. We'll let Scott explain this a little bit more in a minute. The mission for today is we're going to look at designing a VOC study using the Dial-VOC framework. Now, the Dial-VOC framework is something that Scott created. It's something that he's very passionate about, which is having a framework so we don't start trying to work out what our next product should be by talking to someone called Dave, because Dave's an expert and we speak to one person. We're talking about what's the best way to collect the correct amount of information and have the correct products, and then keep that process alive throughout the life of the product and make sure we're just being as successful as we can be. So, Scott, this is the Dial-VOC. This is the explanation. The next slide is the structure. So take us through what Dial-VOC is and why you came up with it.
Well, I mean, the first thing, obviously, VOC is nothing more than a process where we go through capturing and understanding customers' perspectives about a product or a service or whatever you might be offering. The thing for us when we designed the Dial-VOC framework was to create a stepwise process that helped people to eliminate the risk of collecting the wrong data for the right solution or collecting the right data for the wrong solution. Dial-VOC is a very simple 4-function program that is split up into D for design, I for interview, A for analyze, and L for leverage. These functions basically have a series of activities inside of each one of them that have tools associated with them to help you walk through the process to ensure that you're going to collect the right data at the end of the day. Minimizes the risk of collecting the wrong data, helps basically understand on the analysis side what you've collected a little bit better, and most importantly, it helps to maintain the complete path of the objective of the VOC to the organization's strategic plan for the long term. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at one of the most important aspects of this, which is the design function. This is where we're going to help define the objectives, the scopes, the customers, and define the statement of intent. And we'll walk through what all of these are as we get through the presentation.
So one of the things I could probably kind of come in here is, I think most VOCs fail at the design section because people start off with the greatest of intentions and they don't hold themselves to account. Working with lots of different product managers in my time, this has been the bit which is it's a vague statement. And from managers, our statement is get out there and talk to people. Go and talk to people. But it needs to be tighter of that, and you need to hold yourself to account with it more. So design is the big area where we fail. And we go, we're going to speak to 100 people. You're not going to speak to 100 people. Speak to 20 people.
No.
I need to find out all this information. You don't need to find out this information. You need to find out these bits of information.
Yep.
So for me, it's about trying that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think the key, even further on that, is the place where this fails the majority of the time is they go out and they talk to these customers, as you said, 100 or 20, whatever their study calls for, but the objective of what they've decided to try to do is so unclear or so fuzzy that they're talking to the right people, but they have no idea why. This is where Dial-VOC, we think, comes in and helps people to keep them focused on what that objective is so that they're not straying away. And it gives you all opportunities throughout the process of the VOC to course correct should something be needed.
So one thing, and we'll take you into the framework. And before we get too heavily in the framework, and hopefully you guys can see there on this, but this is a framework Scott's created. So what does it mean? Well, first of all, it's just a series of topics that you can go off and look up yourself. And that's what we do. This is why everything is on the internet, right? You can look at this if you want. What we do as well is Scott has a specific course that's 2 day long that you can come in and we can come talk to your product managers or people involved in product marketing, and we can help them do this. Or we do custom programs for people. Some people say, look, we'd like to do a VOC study. And we say, yeah, fine. This is what we have in the framework. And then we have people that help us get on the calls with people and do interviews or surveys or whatever we want. Anyway, that's a little bit about why we have it. Scott, take us through a little bit about the framework. And, I think today we're doing this bit. So take us through the general process.
To talk about the framework in general, this is not something that was invented. It is a mix and a meshwork of a number of different concepts, ideas, but ones that I put together just to have from a point perspective that it helped follow through a process for me that at the end of the day, when I've collected the data, that I know I've collected the right data. Everything else then is just a matter of the type of analysis you want, what you want to do with the data when you're finished, and so forth. But as James had mentioned before, the reason that we're going to focus today on this design function is that this is where I would say probably 75 or 80% of most VOCs fail, or the data that you collect, your company doesn't believe. And a lot of this is just a misunderstanding of alignment between the project that's going to be done, management, and people that are going to be involved in it. So the design phase is made up of some more back-end work rather than actual talking to customers. And we're going to walk through and talk about what kind of groundwork should be done initially. There are some mechanisms that you can do to even confirm, do I even need to do a VOC? I mean, why waste the time and money of doing a project if you really don't need to? Defining the scope. For those of you that have managed projects, you know exactly what this is, but we'll talk about that. And then the biggest thing that most people ask about is, who do I talk to? Who's my customer? How many am I going to talk to? How do I select them? And then the very last function of this, which allows you to leave the design phase, is to create what's called a statement of intent. And the entire purpose of the design phase is to get to this point, because this is the key that is going to get you buy-in from your managerial team to do this project and have it funded and have everybody be happy with the results at the end.
Cool. So once we've done the design, and we'll talk about this, the next bits we're going to do after this is obviously you do an interview. You do an interview, or do you do a survey? And then after the interview, where we've done, maybe we do visits and we go through everything, is the analysis. And the analysis can get quite heavy. Sometimes you have a nice plot saying these are underserved needs and you got this. for managers, what we really like is the repetition of quotes and things that we're talking about. It used to be the bit that would change our management team's decisions on products would be direct quotes from customers of Dial-VOC is the leverage. It's the bit which is saying, look, how do we use this information? How can I use this information to help steer my engineering team to do the right things and follow the spec and know it's important? Or how do I get people in general, management team buy-in? How do we keep it moving? But as I said, that's what we're getting to today.
And the good thing about this, the good thing about this too is that it's not just about talking in terms of doing this framework as a component that is just being handed off to an engineering team. Your customer might not necessarily be a outside customer. It might be an internal customer. Maybe you want to do a voice of customer on your sales team or on your support team or your administration team. Basically figure out and how they interact with customers to help them better do their job, because it's going to be something at the end of the day, anybody touching a customer should be involved in this framework at some point in time. And it is not a framework that is a tool that's used and then put away until you decide the next time. It's a continuous project, basically, that it can always be improved on. So every time you get something at the end, you deploy your engineers or your team to do something. Now you're going to go back to the start and you say, what can we do better? How can we make it better? And you're going to start walking through again.
So we're going to design. We might design a project to make a new product, or enter a new market, or revisit the sales points of why our product's not as successful as well. We could do a number of different things, but this again is focused on the customer. So let's look at the first bit, Scott. Groundwork. We've got to work out before we start, where are we at? What are we doing? And take our temperature.
Everybody likes to have homework. And so this is the homework that a product manager is going to need to do prior to even thinking about doing a VOC. And this is stuff that, for those of you that are listening that are product managers or for your market managers, you should be able to go to somebody in your organization and ask for these tools to see what was the last sort of temperature that got taken about the market, about your customers. And you're going to rarely find that anybody has an actual document because people usually don't do this well. And when they do, they don't really document it very well, that it can be used, provided to the salespeople, provided to the sales managers or the senior management. These groundwork tools help provide sort of an overview of the product and the market that you're going to exist in. They're not going to have any kind of an immediate impact on the VOC. They're not going to influence the objectives that you might have, but you are going to get two really nice things out of this. One is that it's very useful to have for buy-in. So from James's perspective, if I was to want to do a project like this from management, I can go with a lot of the data from this groundwork and provide this to James, and he is going to find that interesting to see why something's not as good as maybe it should be. How can we make it better? And it also helps to understand the results from the data collection. So a lot of times people get results from a VOC and they take the results and they bend them to what they want them to be, as opposed to understanding this is the starting point. I got these results, and now sort of these results make sense because this was the starting point that I had. Now I can make this better. Next slide. And so these kinds of things are all, there's a lot of different types of groundworks. These are the very, very basic ones that you should have in your company. Basic SWOT analysis. You're looking at Porter's 5 forces. Clearly a customer segmentation map or some sort of customer segmentation that you know where your salespeople are going to sell right now. Growth matrices are possible, and even competitive analysis, which is, again, something that everybody should have at hand somewhere, right? But again, you'll be surprised if you go to ask for these kinds of documents. A lot of times they don't exist. And so it's a really good place for somebody to get started on this, to have this as a framework to begin.
I mean, there are exercises to do, but what they're actually doing is just making you think and record. And for me, you could do this as a management team in a day session with a whiteboard and just go through the process. Or, if anyone spends more than a week on this, then, they need shooting, because these are just standard things that, are just really helpful to get yourself completely, I like the
Yeah.
term groundwork because it is grounded. Where am I at and what do I need to do? A lot of the time we don't really start from that point. So the very first bit is like do these basic things, and
Yeah. And don't
if
get
you don't know what
confused.
they
Don't
are,
get confused. You can ask. But these are some very, very basic tools. The big point is that, to James's point, which is really important to understand, this is something that you should be able to gather the information or sit down with a group of people and do this in a day, maybe a day and a half. If this is taking you a week to do, that's a problem. Because you obviously don't know who your competitors are. You don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are. You don't know what kind of forces are influencing you right now, and you certainly don't understand who your customers are. And those, a lot of times, the results of just taking a look at these could be its own VOC.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think they're worthy of doing, and they're if you don't know what they are, they're 5-minute YouTube videos on each thing. So next work of doing the objective stuff.
Yeah, and so this is the next step in that. After the groundwork is creating, part of the groundwork is creating this objective, and this is where, as I said in the beginning, this is where most VOCs fail. An objective. Most people write down an objective, and what they've done is they create a goal, and they're not the same. They're not intertwined. They're not you can't use one or the other. An objective helps define why a project is actually being done, why the VOC is going to be done. And it's going to be smart. So everybody probably has heard of SMART objectives before, but it should contain two very basic pieces of information. What are we trying to do for the customers, and what are we trying to do for ourselves? And it's a very, very short. And if you have to wind up making this more than 2 sentences, you probably don't really know what your objective is. And you're just trying to cover yourself, because if I put in a whole paragraph, at some point, even if it fails, I say, well, I did say this in my objective. It's very, very easy, very simple. It sets a target for the VOC team. And this is something that also helps when you're trying to make sure that everybody's staying on task. Is it always needs to go back. Am I answering the objective? Am I staying on task with the objective? Next slide. And this is a quick example, or a little tiny, game we can play. Again, objectives are SMART. Goals basically outline just differences between the two. But at the bottom, which statement's an objective, which statement's a goal. And so, I want to add 5 new ways for customers to find product inquiry forms on the web within the next 3 months. It's very specific, very time-oriented, it's achievable, and so forth. Or I can go with number 2, which is I want to make it easier for sales to receive and respond to customer feedback. Now, that's a great thing to do, but the problem is it has absolutely no information that tells you it's measurable, something that's tactical, it's achievable, how you're going to get it done. So it's a good thing to do when you decide to put down your objective, is to take a look, see if they follow the SMART rules. If they don't, go back and redo it and make sure it does, because if not, you're setting yourself up for failure at the start. Just so to finalize, and again, this is just why I think this is the absolute most critical part. Defines what the plan is going to do. It's created to align the team and the management team. So once I can figure out what my objective is, I can go to your boss or your boss's boss and just say, we think this is a really important thing to do. Here's why and what it does for us. It keeps the team in check along the process of the VOC, so that you've always got the ability to course correct should you see that you're moving away from the objective initially. The objective always has to align with the organizational plan. You can't create an objective that doesn't strategically meet the objectives of the business. And so everything needs to have some sort of framework around what the goal of the business is. And again, keep it short, simple, and smart. And it'll be very, very simple. If you can't, again, 2 sentences or less. So the next one, which is kind of interesting, is a quick little review to see whether or not you may actually even need a VOC. So you spend some time, you go through the groundwork, do some great work, you get an objective together. And a really good thing to do is just to ask a couple of these questions to see how much do you know or don't know about the project. How much, the answers for this are things that senior management might want to ask. You're already getting the answers to these for buy-in. And the big thing that it does is it keeps you or the team that you're going to work with on this VOC or your engineering group to thinking that they know something when they really don't. And we'll get into a really good example of that when we talk about customers. But working through a lot of these things also helps define new projects. We've seen a lot of times people get through here and they realize they don't know something, and then they understand what they don't know, and that can become a brand new VOC project. But what is the objective or the purpose? What's the completion date? Who's the decision maker in the process of the VOC? Who's the first person basically that can say, no, I want to do a project. That's great, but it has to be paid for. I've got to go ask my boss for some funding in order to do this. If he says no, I'm not doing a project. The scope, what's in, what's not in. We'll talk about that in a second. What kind of product is this about? Which product? Is this something that's brand new and revolutionary, or is it just an upgrade to an existing product? When's the product going to be available, and so forth? You can see that these, but there's 12 simple questions about the group, about the objective, about the point of the VOC, and do you really understand who the customer is that you're trying to go after by answering these questions?
Cool. So that's your checksum. Should I continue? Have I got the right stuff? Can I go ahead?
Yeah. And once you've decided that, if you get to the point where you realize, you don't have the answers to those questions, and you think the VOC is not needed, or I do know all the answers, maybe a VOC is not needed. So stop. Don't waste your time anymore. Get on to other projects. But if you do define a VOC, what you need to do next in our step is to define what you actually want to take a look at and what you don't want to look. Too many VOCs fail when people try to look at everything and they want to ask a million questions to the customers, or the customers start a conversation about something outside of what you really want to know. Most people just let the customer talk, and you just keep answering questions, and then you go down a road where you get a whole bunch of information that is useless. Project scope, for people that have managed projects before, this is basically just what is in and what is not in, or what's out. We recently were working on a project for a high content imaging device, and they wanted to take a look at what people were doing with the actual hardware of the high content device. They didn't really want to know what people talked about, like how difficult it was to make samples or analyze the sample, or how much time that took. And so we created the scope of what's in is the post-assay development, feeding instruments, feeding the instrument through manual or automation, using the instrument and the software in the box to acquire the data. But what we didn't want to have people discussing what are the sample preparation. How do I make the samples? How difficult that might be. And then what they analyze with when they get done collecting the data. So it's important because, again, it can wind up creeping. You get this creep that comes in, and all of a sudden you collect a whole bunch of data on things that aren't required for your project or from the objectives perspective.
And this is really important because, by the way, having been in these situations, you ever get the kind of experience which is they're just going to find a stick to beat me. There will be someone go, "What? Did you ask them about this?" No. So you want to know what's in or out at the beginning, because then there can be no ambiguity of the situation, or you can only succeed if you define what you were looking for and what your success is. Otherwise, you'll always get it wrong.
No. And the stick, coming out, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just maybe that's potentially another project.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, you've only got so much time. If it's like we got 3 months, we want to investigate this market, we want to see if we should make a product that beats that product or does this job or revolutionizes that. Yeah, you've got to narrow it. Otherwise, you're never going to get it done. It's not 3 months, and you sit there and you go, "Well, your target was to do this in 3 months. You haven't done it." Well, yeah, it was wrong.
Yeah, and then once you miss that timing again, this is part of the reason why most companies don't believe the VOC data that they do have, because they didn't get finished in time. It was way too all over the place. And so what am I looking at? After we figure out what is in, what's out, we do need to do a VOC. We understand what our market and what the customers sort of look like. Is now we need to define who to ask. A lot of times, as you mentioned at the beginning, James, every company's got the one or two guys that they always want to go to for asking questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? they will go to the same segment of markets all the time to ask about questions that are products that don't really impact those people. They will forget to ask competitive customers because they're customers too.
I always remember a friend of mine worked for Olympus, and he said, that's a customer. He's an Olympus customer. He said, I could wheel a biscuit tin in that was painted beige and they'd buy it. Right? There is this whole point of you want to find your non-standard people. You want the people that don't nod when you're normally talking to them. Right? There is a certain degree of everyone. And yes, of course, you want key opinion leaders, but key opinion leaders do not represent the entire market. They represent key opinion leaders. Right. So you want
they're not going to represent potentially what you're actually looking to try to do. Say you want to create an easy mode to use your product. Why would a key opinion leader want that? They're going to be wanting something much more advanced. They're going to go, this doesn't make any sense. But if you truly understand who your customer is, that you can begin to understand what they want, what they do, what their jobs are. And so you can start then to create these things. But most of the times during this design process, this is another place where VOCs fail, is you create the wrong customer list and you ask the right questions to the wrong customers, or you ask the wrong questions to the right questions to the wrong customers, or the wrong questions to the right questions to the wrong customers.
So here's a really good example. Scott and I do a lot of work, and people in our industries, which we work in, scientific devices, really they want to sell them to people in pharma and biotech. But the people in pharma and biotech aren't as available as people in universities. Well, they're very different customers, doing very different things. And you can say, well, they both buy the same instrument. Yeah, okay, but they're using them in different ways and they've got different motives and so on. So you've got to try and hold yourself to account into these things. So here's your kind of like exercise checklist if you were doing this.
Right? I was just, for people, who watch this or want to listen to this, or if you're, really kind of curious whether or not you really do know who your customer are, is write down who you think they are and go to your colleagues in sales or in marketing and ask them, who are our customers? And then go to your senior management and ask them, and go to your engineering team and ask them. Now, in the best of all worlds, everybody's got the same answer, in which case you know that you're designing the right products for the right customers, and your sales team is going to visit those people, and this is who you're talking to. More than likely, you're going to find very different answers. And what that does is creates a conflict when you decide to start making new products, because your engineering team thinks, I know the customer. Your sales team thinks, I know who our customers are. And your senior management is going to sit there and say, no. We need to do this for these people. This is just a really good point, but this gets you started to realize when you don't really know who your customers are, is maybe it's time to update or do a customer segmentation properly.
Absolutely. People, look, the biggest thing in the world is we all love alignment and we all hate ambiguity. So if you can really start drawing pictures, stickmen of who your customers are, and have examples of that customer around your business, I guarantee you, your business will start to think so much more about the customers and understand who they are and who they're fighting for.
And quite honestly, I think this is something that we, from a perspective of what we do to help people here, it's just one of the things I think we do really well, which is try to figure this out. So customer and market segmentation is part, is part of that groundwork initially, but this is, do I need to re-segment, reanalyze my customer so that I know I'm going to be asking to the right people? Typically, basically, customer subsets, these customer segments are, they're homogeneous, they're measurable, they're large enough to benefit the organization, and they're accessible to you. The slide just shows a couple of different ways that every textbook in the world has, which is, segmenting by demographic, geographical, behavioral, psychographic. But in the following example, I'm going to show you real quick what's a real simple way, which is I just did a quick chart here of what the total addressable target market is of whatever. Let's say we're going to call it the automobile market, which is very small now. But anyway, the total market we're going to estimate to be about $150 million. And when you're talking about your product, you say, there are people that know who my product are. There are people that don't. And so what I do know is that we made $30 million last year. And if the total market's 150, does that mean that everybody's buying this product? Or do we know that there's probably about $60 million of unaware? And you go through and you do the same kind of segmentation here. I did very easy. They're aware of our product, but they've not tried it. They tried it. They have a negative opinion, neutral. They rejected it. They use it. They're loyal. They're switchers. All the way down to the very bottom where I can figure out and measure how much could I get from each one of these segments, and which one do I want to target for my product? Do I want to go for the unaware people in the target because it's a $60 million business? Or is it better for me to stick with who's aware of it and go after the not tried $12 million people? It's again where you're going to get the best return on the dollar for what it's going to cost to do.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people say, and this is really weird. I'm going to look for the little guy. I'm going to map it out. This is one segmentation. Take a different angle. Segment it another way. Segment it by persona. Segment it by department. Segment it by geography. Try and get your segmentation that you're comfortable with it for you. And again, the further away from a textbook, the more I like a segmentation. Right, that's my personal thing. The more I can relate to it, and people can relate to it, and then go people in geography departments that do ... Right, or and split it up by these are the people that like this versus that. The more it's touchable by you, and part of the problem with kind of consultancy and business management and learning things is it doesn't feel real to you. It just seems like a generic example. So the more you can make the segmentation for you, the better.
And I think to your point, going back to that, James, is when you do segment it one way and then you can segment it another way, and you do the same kind of thing different ways, be a job to be done or whatever it might be, you start to see some overlap too, I think, where these are clear areas where we need to be focusing on. So after you've created this, we now understand what we need to do. We understand what the objective of it's going to be. We understand what we want to measure in terms of the scope. And now we know who we want to talk to with this. The most critical point of this design phase is to create what's called a statement of intent. It's the last phase of this. And the reason that I put these activities sort of in each one of the functions is that I can't go to the interview phase until I've completed all of these activities. If you want to, you're welcome to do some groundwork, take some old segmentation and, use that for your customer stuff and then jump right into a VOC. You're welcome to. I've seen way too many VOCs fail, and I can promise you right now, it's going to be very difficult and very hard for you to get buy-in when you get finished from the rest of the team that the data is going to be any good. The statement of intent, next slide, is basically anytime that you go to visit somebody, whether it's you're here on this webinar or you go to visit a customer, is you want to understand why. So what is the intent of going to visit these people? This basically is going to sort of allow us to define a commitment to collecting data that's going to do something positive for the business. And the backbone of your project plan that we're going to put together in the next webinar has got to be concise enough to make it clear what's going to be executed and accomplished. Your bosses don't want to read a 50 million, 50 page. I apologize for that. A 50-page document on your what you want to do from a VOC perspective. You should be able to make it very clear in a single statement, along with the project plan, what's going to happen. And so the statement of intent, it always is also going to align with the organizational goals, just like the objective does.
So I think the statement of intent is the most important bit. I have a thing when I talk to people when they start in sales roles and they're working from home. And I said, look, my net opinion is you're doing nothing. I can't see you're doing nothing. And if you're a project manager or product manager in one of these situations, sounds to the rest of us a little bit sort of airy-fairy, like made up, right? So what are you actually doing? Oh, he's doing that, and she's doing this. Get your statement of intent, print it out, and make sure everyone knows what you're doing. Because you're in a position which within a business seems a little bit vague. So having a statement of intent so people understand why you're doing what you're doing and what you're going to drive out of it, helps people understand who you are, build this trust of you in the business. And really, I think it's a legitimization for what you're doing and why you're running around.
Yeah. And it's not the objective, and it's not a goal, right?
No, it's not. It's the why I'm here to do what I'm doing and why I'm on this mission. And for me, these missions should last for 3 or 4 months, but they are. And you realize quite how important it is that you get going. There's only 60 working days in 3 months, right? You got some vacation. You're gonna be sick. Okay, brilliant. 50. You don't have much time. So it is a really important thing to get a statement of intent for a VOC to legitimize what you're doing and make sure everyone understands what they're going to get at the end of it. So I think this is a critical bit. So at the end of this, you should have, you kind of go back, it's like you've got the reasons for what's going on in your business, the reasons for why you need a VOC. You've got a scope. You defined your customers that you're looking for, the right customers, and why you want the information from them. And you've segmented your market. So you've got a solid reason why. And you've got a statement ready to go. So next thing is you're going to go from this position to going, right, I need to talk to X number of people about this. I'm going to create an interview guide. I'm going to go through how am I going to find these people? You've got a whole load of struggles to go on from here, but you're in the right place. So
that's right. And you don't forget, the intent is not also setting you up for that particular part. One of the big things about this whole design phase, again, to remember is that it takes buy-in from an organization to make sure that this is going to work. So you need to be sure that you're going to go out and spend 3 or 4 months collecting data. And the last thing I would want to do is to walk into James and say, here's this data. And James go, what do you want me to do with it? Everybody needs to understand that I'm collecting this. And when I do, here's what's going to happen. We're going to make a change. We're going to do something with it. And then to your point, that you're absolutely right. The next phase is the fun part, which is to put together what we're going to do, go out and talk to people, get some information, and move on from there.
Well, I think the important thing is you're either driving or you're being driven. It's your choice. If you're going to do it this way, you're driving. Everyone else is just on the bus. I don't know. There's a bit of like, I'd rather be in control. All right. Well, look, this is the start of Dial-VOC. We've got, in fact, we have like an intent here. You've got some other bits and pieces to say. You've got an example.
Yeah, but you mentioned this at the end, which is, this is just the example of making sure there's a clear alignment across the organization.
So what do we have here? So, to a certain degree, this was ideas for you to go through and how you're going to plan your VOC. What else have we got? Well, look, we have a consultancy business. You can talk to us about doing a VOC. We do training for VOC, and we do, voice of customer projects. Exactly. You might not want to call your customers with your brand name and say, hello, I work for big company X. We're thinking about making a product that does that. So a lot of times we give people the cover to do these projects for them so that they don't have to, and maybe they only need the voice of customer. And sometimes, the product manager doesn't have time, or they want us to find the list of customers or book the appointments. So we do a number of different things. Some other things we're doing, we have a webinar coming up on the 1st of March, which is about planning a consultative sell. So we all know that we should find out the timescales and we should do these things. But what about our specific sell? What about how we get the application information, how we ask it, why we ask it, so on, how we can record it and communicate internally. So that's coming up on the 1st of March. And then we're going to talk about pricing. I got all these people. I want it to be, I want it to be cheaper. I want it to be more expensive. Why do we set pricing the way we're doing it? What's the important thing? How do we defend it? What's our strategy for pricing? Are we entering a market, or are we trying to get less customers with fewer amounts? So we've got a webinar on that. And the other thing is we also have the sales disc book. This was written by myself. This is how you set up and structure your sales. What's the right sales model for you? So you can look at that. That's on Amazon or Audible and so on. So anyway, that's our Friday afternoon, 40 minutes of thought for you. If you've got any questions, we'll hang around. Thank you, Scott. You kind of came in and did this and stuck it together with your other stuff. So we got 40 minutes of a Friday afternoon or Friday morning for you, depending on where you are in the world. And we'd love you to join us at some of these other things that we're doing, or just send us a message and say, we're interested in doing more. So we'll leave it there. We're going to hang around for a couple of minutes now. If there's any questions, if you have any questions, you want to say thanks, stick them in the chat, and we'll answer anything we can do. Yeah. All right. So at the moment, we're hanging around for a couple of minutes until I can go off. And I've got a cold. Have you got a cold? I have to go and have this paracetamol drink every so often to just try and recover. A little bit of a cold. If you don't know, I haven't had a cold in maybe 3 or even 4 weeks. So this is so I am desperately looking forward to summer, which I had last week in Dubai. That was lovely. A little bit of summer, artificial summer by moving yourself around the globe a little bit.
I think that's an artificial summer, though. It's
very much an artificial place. It is it's a very extremely interesting place, Scott. It's basically I would describe it as a Marriott golf resort as a city. It's basically everything is freshly made and perfect. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting place. Wow. It's not like Monaco is the playground of the rich and famous. This is just the playground of the rich. It's just wow. You go to the marina, it's just everywhere millionaires. Right. Anyway, good. We'll do the questions in a minute, and thank you very much for joining us. All right. Thanks very much, guys. We will. We'll wait for any questions, but we're going to sign off now, and we'll catch up with you later. Thanks very much.